The aha moment was born out of a frustration. We felt like beverage alcohol has a depth of flavor that just made us ask, like, well, aren't there full flavored, diverse palate, real non-alcoholic drinks? And so the idea of Five Corners was born from that. We knew that we could craft beverages that honor these real drinks from around the world that boast that kind of wonderful flavor. We're cluing people into those stories so that they can continue to try them elsewhere and learn about them. This reality that there's this awesome legacy and inheritance of great non-alcoholic drinks.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Perfect Bite podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Perkins. It's our first episode of the year, and I'm guessing if you already weren't thinking about it, you need to pick up some non-alcoholic beverages for dry January. However, today's guest and I want to talk about how reaching for more conscientious drinks throughout the year can not only be beneficial for your health, but they can also be just as gourmet and delicious as craft cocktails. When you focus on unique, real ingredients and not just sugary juices, you're never going to miss the alcohol. Please welcome co-founder of Five Corners Beverage Company, Benno Nelson. Benno.
Hello. Hey, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy to see you again. So at time of recording, we met only like 2 weeks ago, but you're so great. I feel like I've known you for so much longer.
I know. Yeah, I think we had a psychic connection. It feels like it's gone way back. Yeah. I think it's literally been like 8 days that we've been together.
He's counting. Who's counting amongst friends here? I think it's also because you and I have I always like to think this, a little bit of California and Midwestern connection.
Mm-hmm.
So when you said you're from Pasadena originally, I was like, oh my God, I love Pasadena. And there is this like mentality, especially out West, focusing on food that seems to connect to Midwesterners also in a way where we're like, more commercial farmers, but out there it's very focused on like fresh produce versus, the corn and soybeans my family does that ends up like in corn syrup. So
it's all part of the food chain,
Yes. Well, I want to talk about things like syrups and everything else that you've been building with Five Corners Beverage Company here. So I always love to take things a little bit back to the beginning. When did you first fall in love with food growing up in California? What were some of those favorite foods as a kid? What was eating like growing up in your house?
So I think the honest answer is I've always loved food. I was a very picky eater as a kid, and I don't really like dairy very much, which my wife teases me as my biggest giveaway that I'm not from the Midwest.
I'm very lactose too, though.
Really? Yeah. Just like
lactose.
Cheese and heavy creams and stuff are just like not for me. And so like as a kid in the, late 80s, early 90s, like that's relatively limiting. Like people weren't as enlightened about food allergies and stuff. And so definitely I was at a lot of birthday parties, like picking at iceberg lettuce while everyone was having a slice of pizza and stuff like that. And I was very fortunate. My mom was a great cook. My dad had worked in kitchens in the 70s in California, in this really California cuisine moment. And so my family loved cooking and cooked really well. And so again, in Southern California in the 90s, there was a big Asian influence in cooking. And so Japanese food and Chinese food were really safe for me and my sister because they didn't have a lot of cheese and dairy and stuff. And so we ate a lot of that. Like when other families were having, pizza delivered, it was always Chinese food for us or Japanese food. And so I think it was a funny combination of both. If you ask my mom how was I as an eater, she would just tell you that I was very picky and would only eat like white foods and stuff like that. But often when I describe the foods that I loved as a kid, I'm talking about tofu and I'm talking about broccoli and stuff. And my wife thinks that's totally bananas. So I think it's a fun combination of picky and adventurous,
Totally, because you said tofu. I mean, I can remember growing up north of Chicago, I didn't try guacamole until my junior year of high school. And now, I was picking up avocados at the grocery store the other day and I was like, why are they all hard as rocks in the middle of winter in Columbus? And like hummus was college. And now these are all things that I'm constantly eating. So I feel like you just got exposed at an early age to what's great. And there's no like quote unquote missing out on things. Like if you don't like them anyway, like
Yeah, yeah. I think that's right. I mean, and I think it does breed a certain kind of like it's very hard for me to be like orthodox about
right.
food because that's not my personal experience. And so for me, the idea of getting super up in arms and saying like, well, that's not even a true, whatever if it doesn't have this particular ingredient. I just feel like that just doesn't sound fun. That just sounds puritanical. And so I think really it is about pleasure and joy and tradition and participation and all those things all at once. And as I now have to tell my children, it's also just about like getting nutrients into your
Yeah.
body and sometimes just like shut up and eat the spinach.
Yes.
So it's everything.
Eating the rainbow, right? That's always
Yes,
a
eating
fun
the
way to
rainbow is
put it to
great.
kids.
Yeah, I
Like,
love that.
yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, my 8-year-old comes back pretty quickly with like, that just means I should eat this bag of Skittles. And so we start over.
Well, they definitely got their quick whip from you guys.
Yeah.
So fun feeding kids.
Hmm.
Now, as you were starting to grow up more, did you ever find yourself in positions in hospitality or food and beverage before heading to the Midwest for college?
I was very focused on theater and on like
Mm,
performance when I
mm,
was younger. And so I had hospitality experience more in the sense of like I was working as an usher, I was engaging people at theaters, I did a lot of
yes.
children's theater, and I did a lot of sort of like that environment. So I wasn't working in restaurants in high school for sure. I did barista work in college and after college. So I was more on the coffee side and I honestly loved it. Like, really enjoy it. I like interacting directly with customers. I love that sort of front of house experience. I love introducing people to stuff. And so it was a really good experience for me.
That's awesome. And what I love about baristas too at, say, a craft coffee place is they are as big of nuts about their beans as, say, a mixologist is about cocktails. So I feel like that was almost part of your origin story here is there are definitely some coffee places I go to and they're like, you got to try this. You're going to taste notes of this, this, and this. And it's like being at a wine tasting, but it's just having a little bit of espresso and it's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I just think like the extent to which people get excited about stuff and the way that our mouths are an entry point of exploring the world and learning about things that matter to us and people that matter to us. I just think that's just something I can really relate to. It's entertainment and it's nourishment and it's engagement and human connection. And I just think that sort of like cascading value of engaging with the world in that sort of sensual way, I just think is so cool.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's delivering folks joy.
Yeah.
And it is the single language that we all share is tasting something amazing, whether you're drinking it, whether you're eating it. So I agree. It's nice when you can see people geek out on something because
Mhm.
it just means that they actually care. And we're just in this world right now where like everything seems so hard to care about sometimes. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I do think it's just such a wonderful and sometimes such a simple pleasure. And I think my wife and my partner in the business, Shelby, we joke a lot. We say everyone spends too much money on something,
Yeah,
right? Some people spend
totally.
too much money on cars, some people spend too much money on clothes. And for us, it's always been on food and drink and just like engaging in restaurants and having those special moments. And I can remember meals more distinctly sometimes than like whole months of my life. And I think that's important. And that's always been a part of how I engage.
Yeah. And I think that if you're even on the chef side of things too, they would be so happy to hear that because I think that's the total point, right? Is unless you're doing quick service and like kind of get and go and just moving on and not focusing on experience, then, you know, it really is about what people take away from it.
Yeah. And candidly, I mean, like even quick service, I do think like there's a lot of competition and it's about,
Sure.
there's nostalgia and there's quality of product. And I do think like those moments matter and being able to count on McDonald's coffee when you're on a road trip and you don't know where to go, like that says something. That's nice.
You're right. I mean, I cannot discount my 10-piece chicken McNuggets.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
So I want to talk a little post college here. So you went to U Chicago, you were
Mhm.
down in Hyde Park.
Mm.
How did you find yourself into the beverage industry? You ended up working at Provi, which I'd love for you to explain to folks who aren't as familiar with this great Chicago company, what it does, and really how it started getting your wheels turning for your own idea and becoming an entrepreneur.
Sure. So, I mean, just the real truth is like I am an alcoholic and I needed to get sober. I needed to stop drinking. And so I was able to do that a little over 7 years ago. And when I did, I started paying more attention to non alcoholic drinks that were in the marketplace. And it was a fun way to stay engaged. And
Yeah.
like, I'm a nerd, and so I like had a little Google Doc when I first started that was tracking like how many calories I was saving and like how much money I was saving by not drinking.
Amazing.
And that was pretty
Oh my
helpful in the first
God.
like 60 days.
Yeah.
But eventually I started spending all that money on non-alcoholic drinks
That's okay.
and trying a lot. And I've been incredibly lucky that during this particular 7 years, there's been such an explosion of interest and innovation in the non-alcoholic beverage space. And so I've been able to try all these new products as they come on the market and form strong opinions about them, but more than anything, feel an incredible sense of like gratitude that I've been able to take this walk at a time when there's a lot of streetlights on. And
Totally.
so that's something that really started kind of simmering for us. And over that same period of time, just to be complete, like Shelby, my partner and co-founder, also stopped drinking for different reasons. We had 3 kids, and so she was stopping for pregnancy and breastfeeding, and then just increasingly valuing her sleep and wellness and stuff. And I wasn't drinking, and so found it relatively easy to cut it out. And so then it became a journey that we were taking together.
That's awesome. And thank you for sharing that. Congratulations on
Yeah, thanks.
7+ years. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
thanks.
And it's a journey every single day. And so the fact that, like you said, there have been tools starting to be created that make it easier to feel a sense of belonging,
Mhm.
not like you're standing out, and also that aren't just as boring as like soda water and
Uh-huh.
lime,
Yeah.
I think is amazing. Like you were hearing from folks 2020, oh, I started drinking more during the pandemic,
Mhm.
and I know that was the year I turned 30. I've really pulled back in so many ways,
Uh-huh.
and it's felt amazing. It hasn't felt like something I miss as much, but when I do have it, then it's great, for me.
Yeah.
But I've so then appreciated the chance to bring non alcoholic wines to my friends and
Mhm.
say, I'm going to have this tonight. Does anyone else want to try? And now we've got Five Corners that we can indulge in as well. So, when you were starting to have these thoughts around essentially what could be better and a better non alcoholic option out there,
Mhm.
what was the real aha moment for Five Corners? And explain the name behind it for everyone too, because it's so cool.
Great. Yeah, I think for us, the aha moment was sort of born out of a frustration. We felt like beverage alcohol has a couple things that are really special about it, like a depth of
Yes.
flavor, like a real strong, punchy flavor. When you're having a whiskey, it's not a rum. Like these things are powerful and full flavored. Whereas, with the LaCroification of beverage,
Yeah.
I love them. I drink a ton of them, but like they're very light, right? And I think very gently flavored. So depth of flavor, diversity of palate. Beverage alcohol has this huge range of tastes, right? It has the bitterness of a double IPA. It has the tartness of a Pinot Grigio, the sort of herbaceousness of a chartreuse. It's like all over the place and sort of what these flavors are that it's offering. And I think that's really unique versus the soft drink world, which is predominantly sweet, 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 maybe sweet tart,
Right.
And the third is domain, like a sense of place and a sense of these stories that we tell ourselves. People can know things like, well, bourbon has to come from this certain area of Kentucky, or Irish whiskey, they dry the malt this way. And in Scotland, it's this other way. And I just think those things are special and resonant, and they're part of the kind of human story and human connection of beverage. And
Totally.
so for us, that just made us ask this question of like, well, aren't there full flavored, diverse palate, real non-alcoholic drinks? Haven't we been drinking non-alcoholic drinks as long as we've been drinking alcohol as a global community?
True.
And the answer to that is yes, fortunately, marvelously. And so the idea of Five Corners was born from that, and having drinks that come from the five corners of the globe and that use the five foundational tastes of the tongue. So salty, sour, savory, bitter, and sweet, all of those. And we knew that we could craft beverages that honor these real drinks from around the world that boast that kind of wonderful flavor.
That's incredible. And as someone who's now tasted Five Corners, I agree. I did not miss this quote unquote sense of alcohol, which when we're talking about the five taste profiles here, it's a huge part of senses. And
Uh-huh.
when you think about alcohol, it's like numbing your senses. So I liked that this was this sense of heightening everything. And so when did you guys officially launch? When did you start working on this? And talk to us about those early days of the crafting of the recipes and the innovation, because your two flavors that you've got on the market right now are just so interesting and different.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So, we were getting increasingly interested in launching a beverage. This was 2020. And then I got the opportunity to work for this company, Provi, which is a Chicago-based tech company that is in the beverage space. And when Taylor, the founder and CEO, hired me, he was like, look, come work for us for a year, learn about the beverage industry, and then you can go start your thing. And I ended up working there for 3 years and had an amazing time and learned so much and met so many wonderful people. And then after about 3 years, I left Provi, and our daughter started sleeping through the night, our youngest. And so we were like, hey, we have all this energy now. We should do something with it. So about 2 years ago, I left that job and started focusing on launching Five Corners. It took us about a year to get everything ready to launch. So thinking about branding and design and getting our initial recipes ready to go. And then we officially launched about a year ago. Thanksgiving 2024 is when we launched. And so it's been about a year in market. We started with just the salted lemonade, and then now we have, two drinks in the market, or sangrita as well.
So cool. I think it's so awesome too of another founder like Taylor to say, hey, essentially get apprenticeship within the beverage industry. Chicago and the Midwest is also just such a great space to learn more about CPG manufacturing, the logistics behind it all, that whole process. Do you feel like you really took away a lot in terms of learning about canning and how to put that product together itself, thanks to Provi?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only reasonable answer to that is definitely yeah. The hilarious thing is then actually doing it for real
Right.
has been like a preposterous learning curve too. So the good news was it didn't expose me to it so much so that I had a real sense of confidence or like hubris about it. Like I knew I still had more to learn than I knew. And that's a relief because man, it's been so many mistakes and so much learning for sure.
It's going to be more too. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
like they're all like mistakes or learning lessons like you're noticing that like most people will never see on the outside. I think,
So.
I mean, like you had the cutest Instagram the other week when you're like, oh no, our labels came out wrong. It's a special edition drop. And I was like, that's the perfect way to handle this is instead of pretending it's not there and being like, we don't know what you're talking about. Oh no, I guess I'll give you a discount this time. Addressing an issue like that ahead of time and just saying, it might look a little funky. Remember this moment, like
Yeah.
December 2025.
Yeah. I mean, it is funny. Like, I would love to have like a super aesthetic, like beautiful social presence, but we're incapable of that. And the reality is, I think it's been fun to just be ourselves. And we didn't set out to create a drink for people to have at Art Basel or whatever.
Right.
Like we really just wanted something that would resonate with people and make it fun to be at a party and have a non-alcoholic drink, invite people into that, not to be preachy or convert people
Right.
away from alcohol in any way, but just to make sure that there's fun options out there for people on their path, you know?
Yeah, for everyone. And like you said too, I like that you said you're sticking authentic and genuine. I think that's always what works best for brand storytelling and marketing anyway, because there was just that height that I think we're coming out of. You can ask Gen Z this too. Is that I think they prefer a little bit more authenticity versus the full filters and Photoshop we were seeing for like 10 years. That felt just, it's these impossible standards. The problem too is we've also got AI coming into the mix that's going to make things look a little impossible, but it also doesn't make it look as real. So I think real is best. And I think your storytelling is real, the branding is real, the ingredients are very real.
Yeah.
Why did you decide on these first two flavors? So salted lemonade and sangrita. It's sangrita, people, not sangria. So don't pick it up and think you're about to have like,
Yeah,
you
you'll be very
know, a
surprised.
whole fruity moment. Talk to us about what really stands out with these two, because salted lemonade, it definitely has a kick to it.
Yeah, yeah. So our salted lemonade is inspired by this drink from India, nimbu pani or shikanji, it's called. And so it features citrus. We do a blend of lemon and lime, cumin, this really cool black salt on this Himalayan black salt, really like funky, mineral rich, coriander, a little heat from pepper.
The cumin too really comes through.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great. It's a big kind of bouquet, you know? And so basically, we started researching flavors or drinks rather and recipes from around the world, sort of like we said, that we thought would fit the bill and be complex and interesting and reach for these different palate moments and trying to make sure that they incorporated a bitter note and a tart note and a salty note and all that stuff. And so we originally developed three recipes and two of them are in the market so far. And the third should be coming in 2026. And so candidly, like as we were developing the recipes, the salted lemonade is the one that we just knew was ready first. We're just like, this one is ready. And
Let's
it's
go test.
we know it's good. We know it is sort of sufficiently honoring its reference point while it's carbonated, which is not traditional. We cut down on the sweetness to let those other flavors shine and stuff. But we just felt like it was ready to go. And so we had originally planned on launching with three beverages all at once. And we were like, well, it's cheaper for us to start with one. We know we're ready with one. Let's get going. And then we can keep kind of tinkering with our other ones since then. And I think that was Shelby's idea. And it was just 100% the right answer. And it's created an opportunity for us to meet people faster and learn faster about how it's resonating and stuff. And yeah, it's been a really great ride so far. But yeah, then the Sangrita we finally felt was ready. We ended up tinkering more with the recipe over the year. And then, yeah, finally launching that a couple months ago.
So cool. And the sangrita too, it's kind of like a michelada, right? It's like
Yes.
tomatoey and a little spicy and like, again, like almost that replacement for a good Bloody Mary, you told me.
Yeah, it's such a great drink. So yeah, it's a Mexican drink and it grew up alongside tequila and was initially
Mm.
served like next to tequila.
Okay.
And classically, it was just citrus pieces with chili powder on top, and then you would drink the juice at the end. And then it sort of evolved over the years. It got urbanized in Mexico City, and then the more savory notes of tomato were added to keep that red color, in addition to the chili powder and the citrus. And that was the one that we locked in on, that more sort of savory, tart, spicy, salty mix. And yeah, I think it drinks a lot like a michelada, so people understand that reference point, but it's not a michelada. I think that we're happy about with our beverages, they're not trying to be any alcoholic drink that you know about. They really are just trying to be themselves. They're just trying to be these non-alcoholic beverages, these non-alcoholic recipes that have this adult palate.
Totally. And when you were describing both of them, each had such interesting cultural backstories I would have never known about before. And so, like you said, the way that craft cocktails have that, I think you're achieving that already when it comes to your versions with Five Corners for sure.
Well, thank you. I mean, we definitely are trying to make sure that we're cluing people into those stories so that they can continue to try them elsewhere and learn about them and not try to replace the existence of those beverages elsewhere or to take credit for inventing them, which we
Right.
certainly didn't do, but really sort of make sure that we're cluing people into this reality that there's this awesome legacy and inheritance of great non-alcoholic drinks. Like you asked me about LA a little bit earlier, and
Yeah.
like I grew up kind of near this store called Galco's, which is famous in the LA area for being this huge, basically like independent soda shop.
Mm.
And it's a fun story, and you can check them out on the website. But it's this crazy store in Highland Park that like has basically every rare, unique soda varietal that you've ever heard of or never heard of. And I remember like I would take my babysitting money in high school and drive over there and just buy like six different cream sodas and try them and see what was different about them and stuff. And so I do think like having a sense of no, there are non-alcoholic drinks for adults, and this is a possibility, and we do get to celebrate these things. I just think is important.
Definitely. That reminds me of Jones soda. That would
Yeah,
be our version, like in the Midwest, like growing
yeah,
up. Yeah. Like that
mhm,
sense of like, oh, it's different. It's cool. I don't get to usually have this. That sense of this is something special. And
yeah,
I think that, at least in my opinion, like should be how like any drink, like outside of your normal water and like coffee and like keeping yourself going should
yeah,
be viewed is this is a special moment. Like it's either being paired properly with food or it stands alone. And so it's nice that you had that through line kind of going from soda to coffee to non-alcoholic beverages throughout your life.
yeah, yeah. And it's been a fun ride for sure.
Are
Still,
you and Shelby big travelers? Because you do have such interesting backstories that you're finding with these drinks.
we have three small children now, and so we pretty much get as far as visiting our parents in Michigan and California. But
Understood.
we met working at Groupon, a
Mm.
million years ago, and we were working on this like international project. And so, like, our first date was in Rome, and just it was just this crazy
Wow.
thing. I mean, sort of, you know what I mean?
You
But
know,
like, it
like,
was
yeah,
just
your first moments where you're like, "Oh my gosh,"
yeah,
you're
yeah.
feeling something here.
Yeah, and so I just think, like, that was a really fun time to get
Wow.
to know someone and to be exploring the world together was something that we feel very
Yeah.
privileged to have gotten to do when we were younger.
Yeah, and learning about those flavors together. Oh, that's such a cute backstory. I
It was
love
very cute. Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So, let's talk about, well, your 4th baby. Five Corners is what, 14, 15 months now as we release
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
What have things been like since launch? How are you reaching folks the most? What type of partnerships have you established in terms of wholesalers or even venues that are pouring these and where you're seeing just like the biggest impact?
Yeah. Yeah, so we have made, like, a really concerted effort to focus our growth in our backyard here in Chicago, and so we have about 60 places that currently have Five Corners on the menu or on their shelves, and all but two of them, I guess, are in
That's
Chicago.
great.
Yeah. And so we've been very, very lucky. Benefited incredibly just from the generosity and community of Chicago food and beverage sellers and stuff. And so it's been really awesome. And we feel strongly that this is one of the ways that we can grow. I think in packaged goods, there is a big pressure to, because the costs go down so much, the bigger and bigger you get, there's a
Right.
huge pressure to like become a huge brand very fast, take a bunch of investment money, make a big run so that your costs are low, and then you can start to make money because you're all across the country. But that's crazy. And it incurs huge costs and it is a huge complexity and it doesn't allow for the kind of learning that we needed to have. And so we felt like by focusing on our home market and our neighbors and selling here, that was the best way for us to grow, kind of more like a craft brewery or a dry cleaners, and just acknowledging like we can be a local business first. So I'd say the first sort of place that we've found resonance, or the first thing that matters to us, is Chicago, and just being grateful to the city of Chicago for giving us this chance so far.
I like that you guys have this approach, and I've heard it from some other really, really smart folks on here that there is just something in a world that tries to make us move faster at all times, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to either venture backing or early stage startups, small businesses, that there is so much you learn from your customers and partners in those early days by taking your time and by growing not at the quickest rate possible. Because, like you said, then if you don't have the proper foundation in place, all of these little mistakes start to then crash down on each other. So, I think you guys are doing it the right way. Kudos. Again, 60 stores is still a lot in 12 months. Think of that, like 5 new partners per month. That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
It's really cool.
What's been the biggest feedback that you've been getting from those folks, as they're pouring it in a restaurant or from people who are picking it up at, say, a corner store?
I think context matters a lot. I think that's one thing for us. One thing that we thought about a lot. Like our drink is in 8-ounce cans. They're smaller. They're like 250 milliliters. And that was a deliberate choice because we wanted to signal that it wasn't a commercial soda.
Right.
And that if you reach for salted lemonade and you have in your mind like country time and you take a sip of it, you are going to be bananas, right? And so I think that's something that we've tried to signal visually, and we've tried to signal in terms of like where on a shelf it is, where on a menu it is, and sort of positioning it as a non-alc cocktail as
Yes.
opposed to positioning it as a soft drink. In the non-alc space, there's this, I think, relatively pointless but virulent debate about whether we should call things mocktails or non-alc cocktails or something. And so in our first printing of our cans, I thought it was clever to avoid that and just say soft drink and say, well, soft drink is not, everyone's talking about hard seltzers and hard honey and hard whatever. And
Right.
this was soft drink. And so that felt very kind of wry to me. And it was confusing as hell to people because it did just make it
Excellent.
seem like when people think soft drink, they don't think
You think of soda?
all these layers of cleverness that I have. They're thinking about us drinking a soda. And so that was a huge mistake. And so on our second printing, we changed it to we just said cocktail. And that I think tells a story about what it is in a different way. So I
Totally.
think that's an important one for us.
Yeah, it elevated it immediately too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think so. It helps also, I think, explain the price point, like because we are a smaller company and so we're not price competitive with
Right.
Pepsi or anything like that. We are priced similarly to other non-alc ready to drink cocktails that are on the market or other just with alcohol cocktails that are on the market. And so I think that puts us on the right shelf too.
Definitely. How have you found growing within Chicago? I mean, in general, Chicago is so great at supporting food and bev founders out the gate, just putting, their big shoulders around everyone, as
Yeah.
we like to say. But there's also this dichotomy to the fact that, like, Chicago's got this reputation as a quote unquote like drinking town. How have you found as you're talking to partners and also through your own organic marketing, how are you breaking through that noise?
So, yeah, I mean, just once again, I would say huge gratitude to the Chicago community for giving us a chance. It has this very distinct shout out, like Western Wine and Spirits on Western. I went in there, the owner there took a shine to us and stocked us on the shelf. And then I left after the delivery and I got a call on my phone and it's him. He looked up my piece of paper and he called me. He's like, hey man, I got a spot on Division too. Why don't you drop off a case at Bodega Division? So
Oh,
again, shout out Bodega Division.
yeah.
And like that's the kind of support that like this community can give to each other. And that's like you didn't have to do that. That was just nice, right? And I think
Right.
you need to earn the restock and we need people to be buying it so that they keep having it on the shelves. But a lot of the way that we initially got on the shelves is people were like, all right, man, sure, I'll give you a chance. And so I think that's been fun. And those moments where, we get on the shelves at like Andersonville Wine and Spirits
Yes.
on Foster and Clark. I used to live around the corner from there when I was drinking. I spent a lot of money at that store and it was great. They got us on there and I was like, all right, I'll come and I'll check on you next week. And they're like, why don't you come back in a month? Like, it's not going to
They're
sell.
they're like,
I said,
okay, it's okay, Benno.
yeah, yeah. And 2 weeks later, they sent me an email and asked for 2 more cases. And I think like that's like, okay, like that combination of being lucky and being the recipient of generosity, and then doing everything in our power to make sure that it's a success for those partners and thinking of them as partners, not
Reviewers.
accounts or whatever. I think that's an important part of how we long term will win and serve the community as a whole. In terms of Chicago being a drinking city, for us, that's an opportunity, not a disadvantage. Because what we say is like your palate is progressive. And what we know to be true is that 99% of the adults who at any given moment are reaching for a non-alcoholic drink have had an alcoholic drink.
Mm.
And so they actually do have a sense of the complexity and range and diversity of alcoholic beverages. And so that's why we feel so confident that they don't only want to drink chocolate milk if it's not alcoholic. And that like that some of that work of palate building and adventure and exploration that people have been doing is the result of the existence of Malort and Hopewell and Middlebrow and all these other companies that are doing great work. And so for us to be able to be a component of that conversation and happen to be non-alcoholic, that feels good to us. So we think of that as a strength of the Chicago sort of beverage market, not a weakness.
I love that your story feels so full circle in that sense too, that you went back to a place that you're like, hey, I used to frequent here for totally different reasons.
Yeah.
But because of where you are in life, where this company that you and Shelby have built, where it's at in its lifetime. And I'd like to think very hopefully. I mean, there's a lot of debate around this on just how the beverage industry is changing, right? We're seeing the trends with Gen Z and Alpha that they're reaching for alcoholic beverages less for multiple reasons. Health, cost, I think is a big one for them. I've also heard things like because they're kind of afraid to like lose control because they're so aware of themselves on social media. That part actually makes me a little sad because I think we all deserve to have like, you got to get your sillies out. Maybe it's not alcohol, but in other ways when you're young so that you know how to act when you're older. And we can all still be silly in other ways. And then there's also that debate from, say, the restaurant side of things, you know, such high margins that come from alcoholic drinks. Do you think that there is then that argument for restaurateurs and chefs that you're working with that, hey, actually, just because you're selling less alcoholic drinks, you can still make up those margins in beautiful non-alcoholic cocktails and other spirit selections?
Yeah, I mean, so I think I have a couple quick reactions. I think
Yeah.
like, one is like long term, right? Like alcohol isn't going anywhere. It would be my prediction.
I
And I
know.
think
Even
I
the
think
more
that
that we
things,
learn about it, like,
yeah, I think that things come and go. And I think some of the reading that I've done on Gen Z versus millennials talks about how Gen Z isn't drinking, and some of the stuff that I've looked at just talks about how much millennials drink. And that's actually unique in
yeah, I think we didn't
so
realize like how much of a binge drinking like
yeah.
generation we've
Yeah.
been.
So I think over the long term, I think that things rise and fall in fashion and beer pops and wine pops and spirit pops and everything kind of comes and goes. And I think like, yeah, again, like if you told me today that in 50 years no one will be drinking alcohol, I would say that's insane.
Right.
I don't believe that for a second. And I don't think that that's necessary or positive in the abstract or anything. I just think I think
That's
that's
just what it is.
yeah,
It's kind of like cigarettes. I mean, we've learned
yeah,
so much about how horrible nicotine and cigarettes are for us. But
yeah,
like speaking of Gen Z, they're walking around with a skinny little cigarette all the time now, thinking it's sexy. But that's
yeah.
something, but that in comparison is something I've actually never touched in my life, where I'm like, no, that's actually not what I want. You're smiling. You might like a cigarette, and that's okay.
Thank
That's not
you.
me trying to shame you. For me, it's like sweet treats.
Okay. Yeah, we've all got something. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that anyway, so I think my short answer is like I think long term, trends come and go a little bit, but I do think that like alcohol is not going anywhere over the long haul. But what I hope to also be the case, and what I believe fervently to be the case, is that non-alcoholic drinks are also not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And part of our case with Five Corners is reinforcing the reality that non-alcoholic drinks for adults are not new.
Right.
That actually what's a little bit peculiar is this belief that you must be drinking alcohol as an adult all the time, every drink. Well, that's preposterous, actually,
Yes.
too, right? And so there needs to be some kind of moderation, even just in our sort of perception of what is it that an adult drinks. And so if there is a robust set of options, I think that's good. Do I believe that someone is looking at a menu and deciding, do I want a Negroni or a Five Corners? I don't really think so. I think often if someone is like, do I want a Negroni or do I want a whiskey sour, is like they're thinking,
Right.
or they're looking at the menu and they're saying, maybe I'll just get water. Oh, what's that? You know what I mean? Oh, that's interesting. I'll try that. I'll try that Five Corners Sangrita. That sounds fun. And so I think like my argument in some cases to bars and to restaurants is that having a robust non-alcoholic menu, I think is less cannibalistic of your beverage alcohol sales than it is accretive to you giving away water. And that having that opportunity to sell them something, to allow them to continue a journey, a fun night, doing cool stuff, drinking something new and special at your establishment, that's against water and not a charge versus it's against alcohol.
That's such a brilliant way of phrasing that. Thank you. There's just so much opportunity here. I love that you and Five Corners Storytelling, as well as other non alcoholic brands out there, are just trying to push through these misconceptions of what it is. Because, yes, when we were first starting with NA wines, like, was I tasting a few that were just pure like juice?
For sure.
Yes. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh no, I can't have that one again.
Mhm.
You and I had a gorgeous cava that was non-alcoholic just last week. And I was like,
Right.
it's the same thing. It's de-alcoholized. I think
Mhm.
that's probably the better way to go when it comes to wine personally. It's just the de-alcoholized version as much as you can, because there are still times when it's this tiny amount. I think you and I had that conversation too, though, that like fermentation is so natural that like even kombucha has some level of,
Yeah, like a ripe
alcoholic.
banana has like
Yeah.
45% alcohol. Yeah.
Right. Right. So I just think that the less that we're running around, there's already so much we're running around in the world about that we have to, like chickens with our heads cut off and like
Mhm.
with our, feathers on fire at the same time, that the issue of alcohol, I feel, should be less of that. And it should be more, how can we grow and change together in a way that feels healthy and it feels symbiotic? Because that's just business, baby. The more options you have for people to bring to the table, the more people that you're reaching instead of excluding.
Yeah, I think that's right. For me, it's about options. And still, like, I don't want to say that it's easy. Like, I think a
We're
bar or
going to be
restaurant has a
challenged.
limited amount of shelf space, a limited amount of inventory that they can take on. They don't want to be reprinting their menu every 5 seconds and stuff like that. Right. And not to sell against myself, but I don't mean to say that it's silly not to have these options. Those are decisions that you're making. But I do think sometimes when I talk to a beverage director and they're like, well, people don't really come here for non-alc stuff. That's why we don't have any on the menu. It's a little bit like, well, do they not come here for non-alc stuff because you don't have it?
Right.
Or do you not have it because they don't come for it? And I think that like cyclical thinking, I think is a trap. And so I do think it's interesting to give it a try, see what happens. How do you promote it? How do you situate it? How do we work together to create those options for people? And does that unlock new patrons for you?
Definitely. I want to talk about what's coming next. We're here at the beginning of a new year together. I always get those tingles. I am one of those people. It's not resolutions I like to set, but I like to go
Uh-huh.
through a full goal setting. Like, who's the woman I'm going to be this year?
Nice.
So, as Five Corners, like a baby, as we stop calling it by months old, what are you picturing for this year outside of the third flavor being released? Are you thinking more community events? Where do you expect to be showing up more this year?
Yeah, I definitely think like, you know, the team is my wife and I, and really just to be like super vulnerable and transparent, right? Like she has a full-time job still,
Yeah,
right?
you gotta. I mean,
So
like for a while with this kind of stuff.
yeah. So we've definitely been dealing with this dynamic of like, is it better for me to spend the time trying to get into a new account or do a tasting at a current partner or like get another store to carry us, another restaurant to carry us, or in trying to do marketing and get attention and add additional stuff. And I think that's like a authentic like push and pull of a limited amount of time and focus that we have for our business. I think over 2026 there's a possible path for us to have an incredibly successful year in 2026 without adding any incremental places to buy us. That with the partners that we have in place and the 50, 60 spots that we have carrying Five Corners right now, if we could really serve them and our community by making sure that people knew about us and knew where to get us and knew to get us at those locations, I think there is a huge growth story that's possible just with that. And so I think that's something that we're really interested in learning more about and experimenting with, whether that is, advertising opportunities, events, engaging with the community, the whole kind of like gamut of just making sure that people have tried us, are aware, and know that we're there. The reality is we'd love to be in more places too. We know particularly being in more bars and restaurants would be a great way for people to try us in a sort of safe way, in a way that feels curated by someone that they trust, in a way that they don't have to commit to buying a 4-pack. They can just
Right.
have one and see how they like it. And so I think that's something that is important to us to really focus on. And then we also know that a lot of shopping happens at larger format places. And so, figuring out, can we be in a Jewel or a Binny's or something like that would certainly be nice. But for the time being, like, really engaging with both dedicated sober spaces that we're lucky to be a part of right now, and then also in the more integrated spaces or even sort of alcohol centric spaces that we're in today, and being there as an option. That's something that we're really, really proud of.
Yes. And I like that you're thinking, okay, the natural instinct is spread, right?
Mhm.
Spread more. But as you go deeper within things too, you can still find that value there. That's even a better case study for others as you continue to spread.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's funny, right? Because I don't know if you talked about this with other people, like being on a shelf somewhere is like pretty good marketing also.
Right.
And then we're definitely at the place now sometimes where if I'm doing a tasting event at one location, someone will be like, "Oh yeah, I saw you on the shelf at XYZ or whatever."
So
And
great.
I'm like, "Oh, well, they sell us here too. And let me try." You know what I mean? I think that is, in the same way that we say no one on earth only drinks one drink,
No,
right? And so this sort of myth of the beer drinker or the wine drinker or whatever is so silly because everyone is much more complicated, and thank God they are. And so in the same way, people don't only shop at one spot, right? Chicago people go neighborhood to neighborhood and do a lot of different stuff. And so every shelf we can be on is beneficial because it's a place that we can catch someone's eye. But yeah, we'd rather be a really, really successful part of someone's long-term beverage strategy than be a tiny part of a lot of people's. But the reality will probably end up being kind of both.
it'll ebb and flow. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. And there'll be some places, yeah, yeah, that are happy to have us as an option, but it's not a big part of what they do. And some places where we can be center stage. And I think like we don't need to be the main character in every story.
Yeah. What would you say you're most proud of so far since launch?
I think there was this moment, like my wife and I met at work, and we had this idea that one day we would be able to start something
Yeah.
together. And I remember there being this moment when things were kind of going well in our respective careers and stuff. And it was just like, is this going to be a thing we always talk about? Or is this going to be a thing that we do? And that feeling of bringing home from the warehouse the first production cans of this thing and sitting down with Shelby and opening them up and cheersing. It was just like, this isn't a bedtime story anymore. This is us really like doing it. And so for all of the absolutely like crushing self doubt
Yeah.
and panics that have happened like since then, like the feeling of doing the thing that we said we would and realizing that it wasn't just hot air means a lot to me.
That's really special. Right. Like,
Yeah. But you
you're
try
making
not
me
try.
tear up. I am. Like, that
I
is
cried
so
everything.
I'm like, it's just, we only have so much time to,
Yeah.
like, in whatever you believe in these earthly bodies or whatever. And so to take the chance to just even do something is just so big. So congratulations.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Sarah. That means so much. Thank you.
Okay. I hate this part because it means we're getting to the end, Benno.
Oh
So
no.
before we get to the world's best and hardest question,
Yeah.
What's one piece of advice you like to give anyone who's looking to be a founder themselves, whether it is within that food, beverage, hospitality space or anything else?
It's hard to make it just one. Well, let me frame it like this. We have benefited immeasurably from talking to people.
Mm,
And I think that more people than you think will talk to you. And just as like a couple things, like people who had no reason to but answered my call. Joe Chura, the founder of Go Brewing, like super busy, whatever. I had an issue with my cans and I texted him and he called me immediately.
oh,
And like that, I'll never forget that. And people in the beverage industry that have helped me contextualize things that are going on. Andy Harrow was so helpful in my initial thinking. The people from Spiteful Brewing responded to a cold email and hooked me up with my warehouse provider. The Hopewell people like talked to me and made me feel better about self-distributing and stuff like that. And so I just feel like people will get back to you and they care and they were there and they remember, and you're going to teach them something that they're not thinking about. I would just say reach out and ask people and don't feel like you have to have all the answers because nobody does.
awesome. Awesome. Benno, here we are. As a reminder for folks, this is called the perfect bite because it's not only a perfect bite of our friends across the food and beverage industry and everything they bring to us, but also because we each have our own perfect bites. Those moments we'll never forget, a recipe, a bite you ate on vacation, just something that will make you smile. So, because
Okay,
you are a beverage king here, what is your
great.
perfect sip?
Great. This maybe will be overly vague. And if you push me, I can make it more specific too. But for me, like the perfect sip does two things, right? And I won't just say that the perfect sip is Five Corners, but obviously I hope it is. But I think two things that a perfect sip should do. One is I like it to end somewhere it didn't start. And the idea of a sip being a story and a sip having a beginning and a middle and an end, I think is something that really matters to me and that we think a lot about. So we think about the aroma, the mouthfeel, what it leaves you with, and this idea that all three of those things are sort of part of like act one, act two, act three of a play, that they're part of that sip process and that it makes you want another one, right? Because a lot of times when we say we don't like a drink, we're like, oh, that aftertaste or whatever.
Right.
And so that took you on a journey, but you didn't like it. And so I think for it to have those two kind of like structural components of ending in a different place than you started and wanting to get on the ride again, that's what makes the perfect sip. And so I can think of sips that I've had that are like that for sure. And we worked really hard to put those structural elements into every sip of Five Corners. There's a million ways to get to there, but that's what I'm looking for sure.
That is so cool. I think that's a very unique answer. And as someone who has imbibed some Five Corners, I can agree. You achieved
Thank
it.
you.
You did it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Benno, this has been so awesome. Thank you again
Sarah.
for being my new friend.
Oh my gosh, what a treat. It is such an honor
Yes.
to know
We're
you, to
growing
be able to talk
together.
with you. I know we've really gone on a
Oh,
journey today.
for real. You're so special. I'm so excited for you and Shelby and everything you're building this coming year. Can you please let folks know where they can find you? So you said generally Chicagoland, as well as talk about the website and your social accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, if you live in Chicago, I would love for you to find us in a store near you. You can do that on our website, fivecornersbev.com. And we have a cute little map where you can put in your location or just look at the map of Chicago and see places where we're available. If you're outside of Chicago, we do have, shipping on our website, 4 packs and 12 packs and mixes and all kinds of stuff. So definitely check that out. And yeah, follow us along on our social media for a lot of really like unfiltered posts about all the screw ups that we make. Those always perform the best. And that's just Five Corners Bev on Instagram.
All
So
the journeys.
yeah, yeah. And it's just us on Instagram. So if you DM us, it'll just be like my wife or I answering you. Sometimes people ask, oh, are you the social media manager? I'm like, yeah. I'm the social media manager.
I know when I say we for the perfect bite, I'm like, it's me.
Uh-huh. Yeah, totally. But it just sounds so much better to say we.
I know the
Yeah.
royal we. I know.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much.
Thank you, Sarah. What a treat.
And everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to our first episode of 2026. This was Benno Nelson's Perfect Bite and Sip. Thanks for tuning in to the Perfect Bite today. You can listen to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks in advance for subscribing, rating, and reviewing. You can follow The Perfect Bite on social media @PerfectBitePod. Now go get something good to eat.